Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
It's been amazing. Here you are on this Zoom call, feeling within the first session like you intimately know these people and care for them. And then all of a sudden realising that even though you're in totally different industries, we're all going through the same thing, or we've been through it and we can help each other, or there's just this hurdle that you can't see past, and then you share it with the group and there's 5 answers in 40 minutes and you think, I have not slept for 2 weeks thinking about that. Like, how is this possible?
You're listening to stories and the breadcrumbs of what makes success, and I constantly get something out of these Zoom calls and catch-ups because we're all living the same stuff, aren't we?
Extraordinary people with extraordinary experience. What happens there is magical.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs, and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. Jamila Rizvi is a best-selling author for adults and children, a speaker and advocate who has helped shape the national conversations on gender equality, parenting, politics and power. Former political staffer, great champion for women, Jamila has held senior roles at Future Women, which she still does, Mamma Mia, and in government as a staffer in the Prime Minister's office of both the Rudd and Gillard governments. And ever since, she has consistently and persistently challenged Australia to rethink who gets to lead, whose stories get heard and why they matter. When Jamila was 31, her own story took an unexpected turn when she was diagnosed with a rare brain tumour that challenged everything in an instant. Her new book, Broken Brains, is a deeply personal collaboration with her friend, comedian and podcaster, Rosie Waterland. Together they explore what it means to live with a brain that doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and how different their journeys have been, given that Jamila's brain is broken, in inverted commas, due to a tumour and the effects of multiple surgeries, while Rosie's brain is broken due to the effects of extreme childhood trauma. Jamila, heard a lot about you. It's great to spend some time with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
You have been a great force for change, and I suppose it's a pretty big life-changing moment, is that you walk in and someone tells you you've got a brain tumour. That's 8 years ago, I think.
Yeah, pretty close. Gosh, I hadn't even thought about how long it had been. But yeah, it's been about that.
How are you today?
Look, pretty good. I mean, I really do struggle with the how are you now and are you better now is what people often ask me when I haven't seen them for a while. And it's such a tricky question to answer because, I mean, the headline is my tumour hasn't grown for almost 7 years now. Like, it's just sitting there and the doctors don't expect it to grow. So like, that's great. And for me, that's a huge win. But having multiple brain surgeries, having radiation treatment, there's a whole bunch of functions in my brain that don't work properly anymore. And so that changes your life day to day. And I'm never going to get better from that, in inverted commas, right? Like, that's always going to be with me. So it does make life more complicated a lot of the time, and it means health stuff is always not too far from my mind. But I think the best thing I can say is that I feel the best now than I have since I first got sick. So that feels pretty good.
It's one of those massive paradigm shifting moments, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You're recently married, you're raising a 2-year-old,
Yep.
You're doing all these extraordinary things professionally. Can you sort of look back and think, God, what's my life now compared to what I thought it was going to be given that diagnosis?
You do get mentally stuck a bit. A lot of people, I think, who go through sort of life-threatening diagnoses or really major events that change the course of their life at a single point, that are sort of tragic events, I suppose, can feel like they get a bit stuck. And I feel that a lot. I often feel like I'm still the same age and I forget that 8 years has passed. And even hearing you say that, I was like, yeah, wow, yeah, that's right. And I think that can mean that you still think life's going to go the way that you'd planned it, because that's how you always thought about yourself, and the version of what's happened since, it looks so different to what I had ever imagined, because no one imagines themselves into, seriously ill health, certainly not when they're in their 30s.
Do you question, is there a bit of like that immediate, why me? I'm a healthy, fit. What, does it make sense? Do you sort of go down that rabbit hole at the start? Or?
Well, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't say I wished the brain tumour on someone I knew, but I wished it on a lot of strangers. Like I remember in those early days walking down the street and being like, well, what about you? Why don't you instead of me? To total strangers who I'm sure were lovely people and didn't deserve a brain tumour either. But I think you inevitably have to. And so much of the stories we tell ourselves about ill health are very rose-coloured glasses stories, right? We make people out to be saint-like, that, you become this extraordinary human afterwards who doesn't sweat the small stuff. And I'm not saying it doesn't have impact to an extent, but you can ask my husband. I definitely sweat the small stuff all the time. And I definitely had some of the hard thoughts early on, the scary thoughts and the awful things. I didn't feel brave, and I didn't feel like it was me against the world and I was going to beat this thing or any of that stuff. I was just really scared.
Yeah. I mentioned the book you've written, Broken Brains. What was the motivation for putting that out there?
Yeah, I was a couple of years into having been unwell, and I went and visited my friend Rosie, and Rosie has dealt with mental ill health and trauma and the after effects of trauma her whole life. And I went to her for help, I suppose, because I was struggling emotionally and mentally with the reality that treating this tumour was not going to be a one and done, that it was going to be something that I had to do again and again. You can't cut out my tumour. What's left of it that's still in my brain is adhered to really essential structures in the brain, including my eyesight. So I would have to sign up to be blind if I wanted to have it fully removed, and the other risks would be enormous. So I'm not going to do that, which means that it's always going to be there and there's going to always be a risk of it returning. And at the time, I really was struggling with that day to day. And I sort of wanted to understand how Rosie dealt with mental ill health and how she coped. And I went to see her, and on the day I saw her, she was in psychiatric care. So she likes to say she probably wasn't the best person to ask for some advice. But we sat down and we were talking that day, and I told her one of the things I was struggling with was the survival rate, and they always give you the data in terms of will you be alive in chances to be alive in 5 years, chances to be alive in 10. And when I said that to her, she looked really shocked, and she said, it's the same. Like our chances of survival are pretty similar in terms of the data around people with complex PTSD and life expectancy. And that just threw us both, I think, for a spin, because when I got sick, people were extraordinary. It was the hardest time of our lives, but like I remember that first week we had 11 lasagnas in the freezer by the end of the week. Like people just came out of the woodwork to help me and to drive me to appointments and to look after my son and to help out my husband. And, they were so kind and so good to us. Many of my friends moved in with us for periods. My family moved in for a while. My in-laws came back from the States. Like people were so generous. And Rosie was dealing with something as dangerous, and no one's ever made her a lasagna, if you know what I mean. So the book was exploring that.
Yeah, it's a great way to sum up the stigma of mental health, isn't it? We still do it, don't we? Exactly as you say, that when we know something's physical, the empathy and the support comes.
We go, well, that's really serious, right?
When the reality of mental health is equally, if not more damaging, but we still don't quite get it, do we?
No, and I think we're getting better at the kind of the short periods or the momentary experiences of mental ill health. Someone who experiences anxiety around a major event for a period, or has an experience of grief and has a period of depression afterwards that is short term and is perhaps unusual for them in the context of their broader life. I think we're good at being understanding. We're good at saying, are you okay? You get your however many free sessions through Medicare. As soon as it's something more than that, or it's ongoing, or it's recurrent, or it's something with the extreme impact of a schizophrenia, for example, we don't know how to deal with that. We don't know what to do with it.
Just changing tack from that, it's an extraordinary first job you've had. You're into the halls of power in the Rudd Gillard governments and into Canberra and writing briefs for prime ministers, and you get to see the power and the leadership from a young age. How's that shaped the person you are? And I think a whole lot of ways, right? But the first one is probably just a demystification
of what power looks like and what important, influential people look like. I think from a distance, we all imagine, oh gosh, I could never meet that person. I could never talk to that person. Oh, it's too intimidating. It's too this, it's too that. But when you work for someone, or in my case, if you work for someone who works for someone who works for someone, when you're doing that, you do see the warts and all in politics because you're with people all the time, around the clock, first thing in the morning. One of my jobs when I worked in Kevin's office was to be in the office first, which was 4 a.m. and this shows how old I am, summarise all the newspapers, getting ready to talk to all the media advisors at 6 a.m. And Kevin was a notoriously early riser, so would often just call at like 4:30 and he'd be like, what's on the front of the Adelaide Advertiser? And I'd be like, I haven't got to it yet, and stress out. You do get to see them at all times of day, at times when they're flying high in the polls and at times when things are really tough. And I think that does demystify power, and it really does force you into the headspace of everyone's just people. Like there's no extraordinary magical human who's different to all the others. There are people with extraordinary talents and extraordinary skill, but all people are just the same as each other.
Incredible for you to be there alongside Australia's first female Prime Minister and Julia Gillard as well, and have that experience. And you've gone on, future women, to shape working environment to continue to do on your passion for gender equality, and a great thing that you're doing there. Your reflections on being around Julia at that time, what's your takeaway on her as a leader and how difficult things were for her?
Her office from the beginning, and it came from her, didn't want to make a big deal of the fact that she was the first woman. They almost just wanted to kind of move on with it, because I think there was a perception of the way she got the job was complicated and people didn't really understand it. And that if they doubled down on the fact that she was the first woman, it just added more complicated stuff, right?
For those that maybe don't know the history, she wasn't voted in.
No, she wasn't. And when she became Prime Minister, she essentially toppled the guy who was Prime Minister, right? Because in our system, it is the leader of the party of government that gets to be the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister isn't directly elected by the people. Now, that's how the system works, so it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But at the time, it hadn't happened before, and I think a lot of Australians didn't realise it could happen. And so it was a shock. It was also, in political terms, a really clean taking down of a Prime Minister. It happened very neatly and quickly. People didn't know about it for weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. There was a bit of chatter, but it really happened kind of fast, I think, for most people. And there would have been a whole lot of people who went to sleep that night, didn't watch the evening news, woke up the next morning and were like, what happened? There's a new Prime Minister? I don't understand. So I kind of get why her office didn't want to make gender a thing. They just wanted to get on with the job, and they thought that'll be the proof of her skill and her impact. But I think in doing that, it sort of made the media double down on it, because it was interesting and it was a fascinating thing. And it created a real obsession. And during the period of her prime ministership, because we hadn't seen a woman be prime minister before, I don't think we even realised, those of us working in government, how wild things were getting. Like some of the stuff that was said in mainstream media, on television, in the newspapers, cartoons that were done that showed her as the madam of a whorehouse, this kind of stuff, like really off things. And the stuff that was permeating online in kind of like the more darker corners of the internet, we probably should have called it out sooner. It was almost like that frog in boiling water factor, I think. It took till towards the end of her prime ministership for everyone to go, oh my God.
Was the famous misogyny speech a turning point in that? And I think if you think about Julia's time, the way she was able to get those words out at the time, were you close to that? Do you remember that day well? Or
I was on leave. I was so mad. I was on leave. I was on the other side of the world. I was actually I picked up some horrible virus. I was in Southeast Asia, and so I was in bed, like in my hotel room, and all my friends had gone out without me. I would have been 24, 25 or something. And one of my mates from home texted and said, "I don't know where you are or if you're awake, but you need to turn on your television." And so I jumped online and went on YouTube and watched the Parliament live. So I just caught the second half, and it was extraordinary. I remember I paused and then I just watched. I went and was like, as soon as this goes up online, I have to watch it again. But it was really fascinating because the whole world responded to that speech, but the Australian media kind of didn't. They were so focused on the politics of the day and what was happening that day. They were kind of like, oh yeah, good speech. But I think the impact of it wasn't felt until we started to see how people around the globe were responding, and people realised what a key moment that was.
I was listening to a Malcolm Gladwell podcast, and he was, as he does, with data and research prosecuting the theory that you have these breakthrough moments, first female Australian Prime Minister, and the world can go, hey, look, we are progressive, we are, and then we see some appalling things afterwards and almost regress back further because, we've ticked that box. Is that, as a young female leader passionate about this, do you have a sense that maybe that's what's happened a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Australia is inherently quite a conservative country. I think we like to do things slowly. We don't like change to rush at us, and we like there to be a sense of sort of consensus that the community's got there first, almost. And we don't like being pushed faster than we were ready. And essentially that's what happened, right? We were pushed faster than we were ready because the caucus made the decision, not the voters. And so I do think there was perhaps some backlash that came in response to that. I feel really sad because I reflect on it, and I know that there are a huge number of young women who I worked in politics with who went, I don't want this job. And not just the Prime Minister job, any job in politics. Like, a lot of people ran away from it. A handful ran towards it, and good for them. But I do think it put a lot of young women off. And I remember putting that to Julia once in a public interview, and she pushed back so hard because I think that horrified her, the idea that people would be put off wanting that job because she was excited for the next woman, whoever they are, when they come along. Yeah,
just hasn't quite happened yet to an extent. You look at what you've been able to achieve from a really young age, and it's, there's multiple disciplines, an author and doing what you've done. What do you feel like within yourself? If you reflect, what are the traits that have enabled you to have the success that you've had?
Oh, gosh.
So you're squirming with that.
Yeah, that feels uncomfortable. I think I'm quite a determined person. Once I decide I'm going to do something or I want to do something, I tend to go full barrel at it until I get there. And that comes with a lot of negative traits as well. That can frustrate the people around you. It can be, you can push people too fast and too hard. And I tend to be someone who can kind of shut out everything else because I'm focused on the one thing. And that means people that matter in your life can lose out, I think, in those circumstances. But I think determination's probably a key one. I think I have always been a good communicator. I love being a leader of teams. I love working in the media. I like being able to take a really complex concept and translate it so that everyone can understand it and everyone can be part of something and everyone can get on board. That's sort of where I'm in my comfort zone, I think.
You've been a great champion for so many spaces and been in the halls of government. If there was one thing that you went, that's what I want to change, that would be my legacy, Jamila Rizvi's legacy, and you could take out a billboard to just express that. What would you put on that billboard?
Oh, wow. God. I mean, I don't know. The list's too long, right? Because when you've worked in government, you're like, this area is important and this area is important. If I thought about not what is the single most important thing, but the thing in my sphere of influence and areas of interest, it's around economic security. And that sounds so boring, but economic security for women is integral to all of the gender issues that we talk about, because economic security is related to women being treated fairly in workplaces. If you are economically secure, you can leave a violent partner. If you're not, often you won't, because it's not possible for you to do that and look after your family or look after your kids, right? Economic security is central to retiring with dignity at the end of your working life. It's also about purpose and passion and being able to do the things you want to do, not the things that people tell you that you should be doing. It's about being able to have children or care for people in your life and become an unpaid carer at different points and be able to move in and out of the paid workforce and know that that's not going to ruin you in retirement. So for me, it would be the work in that space, and I don't have a single policy that'll fix it. But if someone wanted a shopping list, I've got a list.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty fundamental thing when you break it down, isn't it? Without economic security, everything almost falls apart. And in particular, for as you said, for women in those situations, with your access to politics at a young age, it seems a crazy time on the world stage for leadership and political leaders. Yeah. And we're seeing, whichever side you sit, extraordinary things being said. And a new paradigm effectively. Are you concerned about leadership at the highest level in government?
Oh God, yeah, I think we all are, right? Like, I don't think you can turn on the news or go on Instagram at the moment without being a little bit nervous about what's happening. I do worry particularly about the intersection of the way media is moving and the way we consume media and news and the way that our attention is dictated in the attention economy and what that means for politics and what that means for good government. Because often good government's really boring. Like, that's the truth of it, right? You know, the best kind of governments are the ones that are quietly going about the work and have got public servants going to work every day, doing the things, making the small incremental changes, and that doesn't go viral on TikTok, right? And so your ability to get re-elected is dictated by getting people's attention and holding their attention. I worry about just the pace at which we're expecting political leaders to respond. And the result of that is a leader like Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, right? You can probably guess where I see it. But love him or hate him, he's a master of attention and getting attention and moving our attention from one thing to another thing. And I worry if that's the mark of who becomes and gets to be a leader in the political sphere. Like even to give you an example, back in the day, I remember talking to advisors who worked in the Hawke and the Keating governments, right? The governments of my primary school days and before, and they talked about the fact that there was not a press conference every day. Sometimes there wasn't a press conference for a few days. So sometimes the media didn't get to talk to Bob Hawke for 3 or 4 days. And when they did, they'd ask him some questions and then they move on, right? When I was working in government 10 odd years ago, it was when 24-hour TV started in Australia, and that shifted everything because we used to make an announcement in the morning and then people would go on radio and talk about it, and then the newspapers would be writing their thing for the next day, and then we might do a press conference or an event that day, and then we'd have something for the nightly news, and that would get us 24 hours. Now you announce anything and 2 hours later the media is on the phone to a minister's office going, "What have you got for me?" That's old. We've already done that. And when you're working at that pace, and I'm part of the problem, I'm in the media now, so I'm not pointing fingers, but when you're working at that kind of pace, right, like there's no time for big thinking and good decision making and reflection and spending time with your officials in a way where you can explore those big ideas. It forces you to be feeding a media cycle, not making smart choices.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts, who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The thing that I've loved about it is not just the meetings that we have with our group, it's the thinking that you do for days and days afterwards. Someone says something and it sparks a thought, and I found that I would go back and look at things that I was doing in a different light. Within my sport and within women's sport, I'm just someone who I try to lead by keeping people talking about the issues. There's times when I think the person I'm trying to convince is not listening to me. It actually got me thinking about, okay, this is how I need to address my communication with them. So it was so valuable, and the little group that we've got is great, and I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing to connect with them into the future because we're all so very different. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it.
One of the most alarming things for me, again, whichever side you sit on, is just the basic search for truth now.
Yeah.
And not even being able to, historically, you can debate an argument over a factual piece of information and then decide that you're on different sides of it, or maybe meet someone in the middle ideally. But now, the table's not black. I'm telling you, it's a different colour, and that sets off a whole paradigm of sort of teaching the next generation that you don't even have to tell the truth in anything you say. Is that so? Did you see that trend coming in? Is that a Trump thing, or is that something? How do we deal with that going forward?
I don't think you can point at one person, but I think Trump certainly benefits from that shift. I think Stephen Colbert was the one who came up with coined the word truthiness, and that was pre-Trump's election the first time around, right? So like we were going there anyway, I think, and the idea of political spin and the idea of we don't need to accept the premise of the question, or we don't need to accept the facts as they're presented. We can just put our version of it forward. And if I sort of think about that if you take that at its most basic level, right? If you've got a politician who goes out with a set of talking points where you ask them a really straightforward question that they do not answer because they're just going to tell you what they want you to know about that issue. Now we all do that, right? Like my day-to-day, if I was putting it on Instagram, it's probably this chat, right? It's a glossy picture of me being in a podcasting studio having a fascinating conversation, right? It doesn't show me getting out of bed this morning and being like, oh my God, have I got COVID? I feel that sick this morning. No, I'm good. I've come good. I just didn't get enough sleep. It's not me realizing that I left the house and forgot my laptop and having to dash back. It's not me dropping my son off at school and him being like, oh, I don't want to go today. You know, like that stuff doesn't make the highlights reel. And in every space we're curating and just showing little snaps, and they're very rarely snippets of the truth. They're always a curated version. And when you are having a conversation with someone, and particularly a political conversation or an argument, if you're no longer arguing about the best way to do something or your different perspectives, if you cannot agree on the facts of what has happened or what is going on, how can you possibly get any kind of consensus at that next stage of what you should do about it if you can't even agree to what's happening?
It's a good point you make. I hadn't thought of us all being part of that. You point fingers at the blatant lies that you know are happening, as you said, and the distraction, look over here because I don't want you to ask a question about what's happening right here in front of us. But you're right, isn't it? It's a generation now that show this life that they think they're living, but really it's not a reflection at all of what. So perhaps that is part of 2025, isn't it? We've got so used to not, being able to just sit in what is a normal conversation, a normal day. It seems a hard genie to put back in the bottle.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't know how you undo it without a generation that just pushes back so hard against it. And maybe that's what are the next ones called? Alpha. Maybe it's them. Maybe it's my son.
You're the great hope. You're a young fella.
Well, I feel like we've put a lot on him in that generation already.
And maybe that is where I am glass half full, is that the needle gets pushed so far one way that the next generation look up and just go, not going to buy into that at all. So perhaps that is, you need to see the extreme one way, Jamila, maybe to see potentially the bounce back the other way. It's a fascinating, incredible life that you lived, and I love this idea of sitting next to people with great leadership stories and the patterns that allow them to have that success. And this idea, Jamila, of being able to start with leading yourself before you can lead anyone else, what does that mean to you, and what do you do so that you feel your best, so that you can be who you want to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, I think there's been a real transition in that regard the last sort of 6 or 7 years, essentially having to get used to being someone with a disability. And it is a really different experience to, I think, grow up disabled to acquiring disability later in life. It's also a very different experience if you are someone who, when someone looks at you, they know you're disabled, or someone like me where you don't necessarily know. And there's a lot of advantage that comes with not having to tell someone I'm disabled if I don't want to. Enormous advantage that comes from that. But there is also some disadvantage in that sometimes when you really need people to know, they don't. So for me, being able to show up at work and to be the best leader I can be for my team and the people I work with has required me to slow down, which is very uncomfortable for me. And it has required me to pay attention and I think listen to my body in the purest sense of that, in a way I probably just didn't do before. Previously, I was just a push through person, always. It didn't matter if you hadn't had sleep, didn't matter if you hadn't eaten well, like it was a survival push through situation. And for me now, that's life threatening. And I'm sort of balancing a cocktail of medications that replace brain function for me every day that require me to be really responsive to where I'm at and how I feel and what's going on in my body and brain every day. And I have gotten used to doing that the hard way by getting it wrong and ending up in hospital most of the time. But I know I've gotten better because I'm doing that less and less now, and haven't done that for a good few years now. And so for me, it has been about coming back to the real fundamentals. Now, for me, they're kind of complex, but for the average person, that is the basic stuff that I say to my 10-year-old when he tells me he's feeling sad or feeling angry. It is, have you eaten? Did you sleep well last night? Have you had a glass of water? Have you given someone you love a hug today? It is, have you gone outside and moved your body? Like the basics of that stuff, I think, is the stuff that maybe everyone can get away with it in their 20s and early 30s. But I'm definitely at a point now where I cannot get away with not thinking about that stuff. And somehow that is harder than it's ever been to do. They're such basic things, but actually making sure that's the case through the day is essential. I was reading I don't want to go off topic, but I was reading a piece of research the other day, and forgive me, I can't remember which university it was from. It was from a Canadian university, but it was about bias in hiring decisions and looking at particularly racial bias in hiring decisions. And they did this sort of longitudinal study with a bunch of different companies over a long period. So they had a whole bunch of macro data, and they looked at all these different factors and how much race was impacting these hiring decisions, and it was having an impact, and they were able to measure that. What they found was whether or not the people on the interview panel, how recently they had eaten, how recently they'd had a glass of water, and if they had a good sleep the night before, had way bigger impact on their approach to deciding to hire someone or not, right, and how they showed up in the room to whether or not they were racist. And I kind of look at that and go, no, we don't actually just talk about the basics enough.
Yeah, and not many people live with the consequences like you do, which is, as you said, if you've got a tumour and it's life-threatening, your routines become at a higher level, don't they?
You can't miss the medication, and you've got to I have a whole bunch of things going on, but in particular, I don't produce cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And
as a result of the treatment.
So I don't have that anymore. I have to take it medically. So your body, if you experience stress today, whether that's emotional or work stress or physical stress because you did something particularly hard, or heaven forbid we're in an accident or something, your body would produce cortisol and produce a bit more to get you through that period. And we all talk about keeping cortisol low. You don't want it to be too low, I promise. For me, my body can't respond. So if I experience significant stress, I have to go take extra medicine, which means I have to be super alert to my experience of stress. And I think, as we all know, often we experience stress and don't realise it's happening. And that has meant probably becoming a lot more self-aware than I was before.
So we can get stressed re an email. We can get 100%. Stressed by a phone message left to us. So that body, and that's where, over a sustained period of time, when you live in that stress state, we make ourselves ill. But it's an important thing, cortisol, if a tiger's chasing you out of a cave.
100%. That's what's going to look after you. But we respond to those emails sometimes like the tiger is chasing us, right?
So you need to artificially take cortisol on those and understand your emotional state. That's pretty full on, isn't it? Is that something a lot of people got to do with?
No, it'd be a pretty small number of the population. There's certainly, it's broader than my tumour, for example. Most people with pituitary tumours or related issues, Addison's disease and the like, would do something similar. Yeah. But it is a weird thing to think about. To the point that I remember a couple of years ago, my husband and I had a really big argument, and he sort of was like, "I just need some space," and he walked out of the house, and then his car drove back into the driveway, and he came upstairs and he was like, "You should take more cortisol." And then he left again.
I don't know why it is we laugh when you hear about other couples having arguments, because we all
Makes you feel better about yourself.
I mean, that's why we laugh, because we go, I had a real blowout a couple of weeks ago. My fault, as it turns out. Is there one piece of leadership advice, Jamila, that you pass on more than any other?
All right, there's probably two. The first is, I really like that phrase that clarity is kindness. I do think we have a tendency in kind of corporate land, public service is the same, that we're so worried about someone being upset or someone's feelings being hurt that actually we just kind of obfuscate around what we're trying to say. And the result is that that person never gets the message of what's not working, and they don't learn to be able to take negative feedback. And eventually you do have to tell them what's not working, because they'll keep doing it. Whereas if we had that clarity at the beginning, I think it would be kinder. I think that clarity has to be contextual. It can't be out of nowhere. It's got to have context, and it's got to have the kind of examples that you can give with it so someone can really understand it. And someone needs to understand the consequences of it. So it's got to have that context. But I think that lesson is such a simple one, and yet it is so hard to do, because I know my instinct whenever I know what I'm saying is making someone feel bad is to make them feel better.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is more helpful, especially with early career staff, if there's something that they're doing that is a real problem, you are doing them a service by making sure that they know and that they understand what they're great at and what they need to work on. We all need a little bit of that, and I think that's something I try really hard to tell other managers who are working to me. Like, by avoiding the topic here, you are not doing the right thing by that team member. You want to make sure you're helping them along, even if it feels yucky. And then the other one for me, I think, is again about communication, which I think so much leadership is about good communication, and that's around certainty and predictability. I try really hard to be very predictable in my approach to running a team. Not in what we do, not in the things we chase and the things we're trying to achieve. They should be exciting and grand and ambitious and all those things. But I think predictability makes people feel safe. You want to know how your leader's going to respond. Maybe you don't know exactly what they're going to say, but there is a lot of comfort in knowing how they will respond to something. If you're a leader who one day problem A happens and you walk in and you scream and shout and throw stuff and go nuts, and then the next day problem B happens, which is pretty much the same problem, and you walk in and you go, nah, don't worry about it. You create just utter confusion, and it actually builds a sense of fear, I think, and disharmony, because people are always second guessing, like, what am I going to get today and how is she going to respond? So I try really hard to be as consistent as I possibly can. And it sounds kind of boring to be like, yeah, I'm going to try and be predictable. But I want my team to have a sense of we know what's going to be a big deal. We know how she'll respond if it's a big deal, and make sure that they've got that sense of safety, that when they come to work, they don't have to second guess what's going to happen.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, the clarity with which you articulate that. You've been around some inspiring leaders your whole life. Has there been one in particular that you've thought, God, that's the type of leader and the way they've been able to chase their vision is one that you've wanted to follow?
I think I've more had different things from different leaders. There's been different traits where I've gone, oh, I really admire that in different people. One of the things from afar for me, when I was working for the Gillard government, was, and I worked for Kate Ellis when she was minister for a while, and she and Julia Gillard both had this, was the ability to find the laughter and the fun even when things were pretty grim. And I think when the leader can do that, it gives permission for everyone else to do that. Like, I remember when there was the hung parliament, when Gillard had gone to the election after having deposed Rudd, and she'd gone to the election, and we had a hung parliament in the lower house for the first time, and there were 9 or 10 days of negotiation with the crossbench where she and Tony Abbott were negotiating, trying to figure out who was going to form government, right? And I was a staffer at that time, but technically I didn't have a job, and there were quite strict rules that we weren't allowed to go and do our job because there wasn't a government formed. But I did go up to the parliament one day just to see, as a friend, if Kate Ellis, who I was working for at the time, to see if she needed a cup of coffee or anything brought to her, because she was up helping. And I was meeting one of my other mates, and I was waiting outside the Prime Minister's office for this mate of mine who worked for her. And I had my head in my hands because I was a 24-year-old, 23-year-old. I lived in a house of staffers, and we were potentially all going to be unemployed on the same day. Like, it was a really tricky time for us as the staff trying to figure out what would happen. And someone tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and it was the Prime Minister. And she went, "You all right, mate?" And she had all the security guys around her. I just didn't have time to lie, like think of a good lie and be like, yeah, I'm fine. And I just went, oh, I'm really worried we're going to lose, which is not a great thing to say. I should have said something encouraging. And she just went, yeah, me too. Like this, and everyone was laughing. It was such a breaking of the tension. And I think that was something I really admired. And then more recently, I worked very closely with Helen McCabe, who founded Future Women and who used to edit the Women's Weekly, and is very senior at Nine, and who is a great leader of people. And one of the things I really admire in her is I've always worked in organisations where if someone quit, it was a big deal. Like people were mad. You felt a sense of betrayal because someone was leaving. And it was never people weren't supported to chase what was next for them. And one of the things I loved about working with Helen, and it's perhaps telling that I've not left, is that she's so relaxed about it. Whenever we've had someone move on to the next thing, she makes sure that they go with support, that they go with always call us if you need anything, that they go with a sense of generosity rather than a sense of you've quit our team and joined another team. And the way she has taken the stakes out of someone's ability to move in and out of a job, I just really admire her. And I can't believe it used to be such high stakes in my head. And it feels really nice to be able to talk to a team and say, we are building you to be great at something while you're here, but also be great when you inevitably move on to the next thing, because you will one day.
Yeah, it's a great point you make there, isn't it? It's that the more organisations try and golden handcuff people and constrain them, the more likely they are to want to leave anyway.
100%. Whereas
you build all that capacity in people, they are likely to leave at some stage, but they're probably likely to stay longer because you've done all the things that you just said. It's a great point that you shared. Curiosity is a word that comes up a lot when I sit down these interviews. See people like you inherently curious. Is that show up for you? And could you share a rabbit hole of curiosity that you've gone down in recent times?
Oh God, how embarrassing! Nothing cool. I feel like the answer is definitely a curious person, and I really work hard at trying to find things that I want to work at and have a go at that I am not good at, because I think it's really easy to love the things you're good at. I mean, it's a great feeling when you're great at something or you're winning at something. But I do try really hard to, I think when you're trying to perfect something that you're never going to be the best at, it's quite good for you, because it sort of forces you into a space of, I'm not doing this for attention, I'm not doing this for applause, I'm not doing this for even an outcome. I'm just doing it because it's nice to work at something and try and get better.
Have you got an example of that?
Yeah, when I was sick, everyone baked for me. I could not cook. I could hardly make a toasted sandwich when I got sick. Was famously terrible. And I have since worked really hard at becoming a good baker. I'm not, but I am not as rubbish as I was, which is in and of itself feels like an achievement.
Interested in collaboration. We love this idea that the sort of cost of leadership is time, and juggling all the workloads, and you as a mum and all of us, the demands, but still been able to create an environment of collaboration and in the things that you do. How do you manage all of those different elements in your life?
Oh, I feel like I'm someone who likes creating and building communities. I think that's sort of quite core to who I am, and that's what I've done through a lot of my work, has been about creating communities of women, or creating communities who are trying to help women in various situations in a professional sense. But at home, that is just as important for me, and that means a lot. And I am by no means the person who's going to run the P&C or, be in charge of the school fete. I wish I had that sort of generosity. I think I just don't have the time, but I try and make sure that where I am involved, I throw absolutely everything at it. And I think you reap what you sow, right? And I think as a result, my husband and I speak about it all the time. We live here in Melbourne. We've got no family in Melbourne. Until very recently, we had no family in Victoria. And we have built a community that we love so much around where we live and the school that my son goes to, that we can never leave. Like, we are now stuck here. We can never go to where we actually have our family or people that are related to us, because we definitely can't leave that neighbourhood. And, you don't set out to make a contribution to the school or the community or the neighbourhood or whatever because you want to make sure that they hang around you. But it's more about caring about the people who are where you live. And I actually really found that here in Melbourne, the pandemic had a lot to do with accelerating that. There was a real story of loneliness, and I know that was a lot of people's experience. But for me, there was a real sense of locality. And because we didn't leave the 5-kilometre radius around our house, kids learning to play together in the street again, usually not touching each other and staying on their vehicle used to be our rule. I remember having picnics sitting in front of our house and chatting to people on the other side of the street, right, and staying away from one another. But that real connection and care for one another has stuck around. And for me, that's sort of like the essence of collaboration.
That's a great positive story out of that time. I haven't got many to share.
Look, my husband accuses me of having rose-coloured glasses about the pandemic, but I think there was some small good things.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I saw our guys get on bikes and go down the park and just hang out, because back to nature and a lot of those things, even as full on as it was, and you look back at some of the craziness as well without a lot of fondness. But community is everything. I love hearing those stories. It's just your happiness attached to having that community around you and creating it is a great story. You've mentioned communication quite a few times already, and just you can tell you're a brilliant communicator. Is it something you've given thought to, a mantra about how you communicate, or have you just been naturally good at it?
Oh, certainly not naturally good at it. I think like everything, I think instinctually maybe, but I've worked really hard at the kind of communication work that I do. I'm certainly not, a natural born writer, I don't think. I've worked really hard to try and get better at it. And I think most of us who manage teams or are leading a group, you do have to reflect on the way you say things all the time, because the number of times you walk out of a meeting or you walk out of a session, whatever it is, and you're like, they took something totally different out of that, and you wonder how that's possible. So I've dedicated quite a bit of time to thinking about, well, how do you correct that? How do you say the same thing in a slightly different way? How do you say something in a way that person is going to respond? For me, that's, I suppose, the one thing I tend to think about. It's not a line or a mantra, so to speak, but I'm very audience focused, and I was editor-in-chief of Mamma Mia for 4 or 5 years and worked really closely with Mia Friedman. And one of the things that she always used to say to us was, don't publish a website for your mates. You are publishing a website for the audience. Like, if you're trying to impress your journalist mates, it's going to be a rubbish website. Like, the audience has to come first always, which means not assuming knowledge and meeting them where they're at and meeting them with compassion and respect, never talking down to them. And I do think I try and stay audience focused in almost all my communications as a result of the way she drummed that into us. Because I always think about who's going to read this and what do they need, or who's going to hear this and what do they need. And even if that's a one-on-one conversation with someone in the office who needs to, do some work on a particular skill, trying to make sure that you've been understood, not that you just said your bit, I think is pretty critical for most people's work.
Who's been the greatest leader in your life?
That's a really good question. That's a really hard question to answer, I think. I feel like there's a whole lot of people that I admire, and so I find it really hard to pick one person. But I have loved working for Helen McCabe, who I work alongside at the moment. And this is the longest I've ever been in one job. And she leads a team who genuinely, I think, would go to war for her. And there isn't just an incredible loyalty. And it's because that loyalty gets shown back the other way. So I think, you mentioned my illness earlier, and Helen, I was actually down to the final one for 2 jobs. I'd been freelancing for a few years, and since my son had been born, and I was ready to go back to a workplace, and I had these 2 big job offers on the table the day I got diagnosed. It was quite unexpected. And I called the other one, and they were so kind. They really wished me well, and they sent me these beautiful flowers, which was very generous. And I called Helen to say I can't take this job. And she just said, "When will you be better?" And I was like, "I don't know, I got a brain tumor, I was scared." And she just said, "I tell you what, I'll just not fill the job for now, and you let me know." And I was like, "It might be never." And she was like, "All right, well, if it ends up being forever, I'll find someone else." But and she waited 5 months for me to come back, and when I came back, I had aggressive regrowth within 6 weeks, and I was like, "I need 4 months off." And she said, "How are you going to afford it?" And I was like, "Yeah, the way they kind of got to go, yeah, things are getting a bit tight because I'm not going to work anymore. Things are a bit tricky, but we'll be fine." And she said, "You don't have any leave, like you've been here a few weeks." And I was like, no, but it'll be fine. Thank you though. And when I did, I was like, I should check my leave because I might have like 2 days I could use. And she had given me all my sick leave and annual leave for the next 4 years and just brought it all forward. And she hardly knew me. Like that wasn't, if she did that now, I'd still be very grateful. But, I've been working for her for years, and there's a sense of commitment, but she didn't know me at all. And, that is the kind of person that you'll follow forever.
It's a great story, isn't it? You never ever forget that, do you, in those moments. And I'm sure she's the person that would have done that regardless, and even if you did go elsewhere. But I love hearing those stories. We're a bit obsessed, Jamila, with collaboration. The idea when you bring great people together, you get the sum of those parts, and you've had some great collaborations in your life already. Has there been someone in one area of interest that you thought anywhere around the globe that you'd like to connect and collaborate with?
Oh, that's cool. I mean, yeah, there's a whole bunch of people, right? I am a massive fan of Roxane Gay, who's an author and feminist and leader in the US. And I got to interview her for the Wheeler Centre a few years ago, and she was absolutely extraordinary. Like, it was one of those, I think there would have been 2,000 people at the event. It was massive. And I didn't even feel like I was I was nervous the first few minutes. And then I didn't even feel like I was on stage. I just felt like I got the best seat in the house because I got to just sit there and ask the questions. I hardly said anything. I was asking such short questions because I just wanted more of her. I thought her take on the world and her understanding of the intersections of politics and gender absolutely blew me away. I don't even know what the collaboration would be, but that would be very cool.
I'm sure it would be an amazing connection to make. It's been great to meet you. I've heard a lot about you, and incredible story that's got many more chapters to write, and great to see you in such great form. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thank you.